Hi, friends. Host of Talking with Famous People, host Eric here, and I am making a video tonight at the behest of my ex-wife, Candice. And this video is about, specifically and narrowly, things that I felt were selfish about how I behaved when we were together. Now, it's taken a long time I think, for us to get to a point where I can tackle this without getting mad on some level. So I think we both feel wronged. Not as a primary response to one another. I think we both care about each other as human beings and as family members, though platonic family members, for sure at this point. And with good reason. Because it preserves for us, I think, a family closeness that is much valued by me. Probably, I think, much valued by her. But also, she and I are at a point where we may be recognizing that we move on to somebody who's going to be as important, or we're trying to, or we might, or we're opening up to that possibility at least. And without going into a lot of details about that for either of us, I want to address the question specifically that she asked me to address, and to address it as thoroughly and honestly as possible, noting that it informs future relationships much more than it could ever inform the past relationship, the events of which are set in stone because they've already happened and we can't go back and change things, but the meaning of which changes as the relationship in the present changes. So, how I utilize those events in talking with others, with talking with Candice, changes what they mean fundamentally in terms of impact upon their perceptions of me and of impact upon the events and of the events' impact upon them. So, in this light, do I present the following attempt to answer the question: in what ways was I selfish during the marriage? What would I change if I could go back and do it differently? Or what will I resolve not to do in the future relationships? Well, my number one thing was that I was not willing to do my part with little household chores, stuff like that. I was exceedingly avoidant. And the reason is because I was selfish. I mean, at the end of the day, I was just really selfish. And everything was so different then. I was working a lot. It was intermittent whether I was happy or not. I just didn't want another thing. I had problems with alcohol, even way back. It was something I was wrestling with, and it occupied a lot of attention. It was just like the last thing I need to do was little shit like this. But life's different now, and I see how that was a manifestation of my own failure to be anywhere close to an optimal version of myself. I was running on one cylinder. Morally, I was running on one cylinder as in terms of lots of different things. So, moving on from that topic there, I'll return to the specific thing. Number one thing I want to mention is I'd like to be less selfish about in future relationships, is sharing in small chores, not burdening the other person with picking up after me and shit like that, not burdening the other person with doing my laundry and making sure I'm attentive to how much I'm asking of them by default, well, not explicitly asking, but how much they're doing for me because I'm letting them do it, and manage also how much I'm doing for them, how much I'm accommodating them, which for me, my second point, ways in which I was selfish. I was sexually selfish. And I'm going to have to learn what it means to not be that. For me, basically, it boils down to this. I need to talk openly with a significant other in private about what she wants and let myself be directed some. Happily, willingly, because I exist in a non optimal state regarding that. And I'm sorry I was selfish like that, Candice. And third area of selfishness. I was selfish in my use of argumentation. I didn't necessarily always use it fairly. You got better and better at it, of course. Mostly I was pretty fair. But I think the fact that it came out in your favor, that I argued with you a lot, does not mean it wasn't selfish of me to do so in my motivations, even though it turned out unselfish in the results. You've got to be one of the most effective users of TI for an FE DOM that I could imagine. You've got excellent introverted thinking, even though it's in your fourth slot, and it's because you had to argue with me all the time. You're good at it. You're slippery, but you're good at it anyway. I mean, the other thing is you've gotten more fair as after we got divorced. I appreciate that. That's the way where you were generally selfish during the relationship is you were unfair in your argumentation. I was unfair in mine. We shouldn't have been arguing, you know? It was selfish to want to argue for both of us because what we should have done is wanted to find solutions together. But that was never going to happen when I was drunk, and once it was over, me and drunk, you still had as your reference, field of reference, you had all those years of me being drunk and so little time of me not being drunk, and the little time of me not being drunk was inconsistent. What was difficult for you to understand or sit back and believe at all, looking from your perspective, here's this sea of data that's all negative. Here's this little bit of data that's inconsistent. True, none of it's exactly negative, but it's not what I would like it to be. Compared against the standard I would like, it's awful. So really, when we talk about our marriage, it's impossible for me to talk about it except under two phases of marriage. The first phase was the drinking phase. In that period of time, how was I unselfish? Number 4, I was a drunk. That's the biggest selfishness I had of all. It was unacceptable. Another way that I was selfish, number 5, this one is a backhanded sort of selfish. It's going to be more of a critique on you than it is on myself. But I actually think this is selfish of me to have allowed this, which is I let you have control of things you shouldn't have had control of. I let you define the narratives in order to protect my drinking. And it was... I mean, we both got warped during the time when I was drinking. It was my fault, ultimately. It's a subset of how... I mean, but it's me, another example of me abdicating my duties. You shouldn't ever have been the one to have to tell me the narratives for things. You tell me narratives, things that happen to you, or things that aren't related to me, or things that happen during the day, great. Love to hear it. But you shouldn't have to define the narratives of us. You can't, possibly. Because your narratives don't... Your narrative generating capacity is insufficient to contain the scope and series and multitude of narratives that come out of me that have to be processed through some other narrative. So that's why we ended up just getting stuck at home. I would watch TV, get drunk, and the next thing I was selfish with. I was selfish about I used the argument of autonomous self satisfaction too loosely. By which I mean, I did what my dad did. My mom would say, "Well, I want to see this movie." And I said, "Well, I want to see this movie." And then my mom would say, "Well, can we see your movie first, then we see my movie?" And whatever. I don't want to see two movies. I just want to see one movie. And then my mom would be like, "Well, could we see my movie this time?" And you'd be like, "Now, Jane, now listen, there's no reason we can't just go each see our own movie. There's no reason for this, so you need to stop your silly nonsense." He said shit like that to her, you know? So, to the extent that I did that, I'm sorry. I always hated it when I was a kid. I thought my dad was being unfair from when I was a kid. I always sided with my mom. I never said anything because it wasn't my business. That sort of thing wasn't okay for me to chime in on. So, it was ugly. To the extent that I did it to you, I'm sorry. I know I do a little bit of that. I mean, it's one thing to have the rhetoric. It's quite another thing to actually not end up being cooperative, not end up going to the movie, not end up sharing, whatever. I don't think that happened much. I was usually probably the one making the compromise suggestions, in fact, but that's not the topic of this video. That's about it for selfishness. I feel a little remiss because I feel this sense of, there's a lot of ways I wish I could say I was unselfish, but it's not the topic of this video. I'm going to indulge one. I was unselfish with Delilah. I didn't use her as leverage in anything, ever, with you. And you got to spend a lot of time with her, plenty of it away from me, plenty of it with me. I got to spend a lot of time with her. And that worked out really well. I'm so glad that my daughter's childhood is one that I was quite active in, more so than most parents, for sure. I was unemployed for parts of it, and then for other parts of it, she was at school at the same place I worked, so she was with me at work all day, in my classes multiple times a day. I was lucky, and Candice benefited from that and helped make that happen as well. So I don't know if either of our current things are going to take or not, but in yet another of the universe's magical thinking coincidences that it keeps imposing upon me, it seemed when I talked to Candice last night and she was sobbing, talking about somebody that she feels as though she's ready to love with the same kind of abandon, taking care of kind of abandon that she poured into me. On that level, maybe, having already said something else with the most selfish thing, maybe the most actually selfish thing was just taking you for granted. You gave so much, and when I was drunk, I definitely took you for granted. Abused the kindness. And when I was sober, I expected too much of you. I didn't understand that well, I sort of did. I couldn't be spending much time busting your chops for shit that you had developed as bad habits because I had been drunk for years. Now that I'm not drunk, because wait, hold on, justice, please. You're getting mad at me for shit you caused by being drunk all these years. Unavoidably a problem. Um, I don't know. I'm sorry our shit fell apart. I wasn't lying when I said I'd never leave you. And I'm glad you left me. Thanks for everything. I hope you make it stick with your new person. I love you always. For sure. Have a good night, Candice, if you see it tonight. And if not, we'll talk soon. See how we're doing. Bye.